Do you want the culpable parties held accountable for murdering the father of your children?
Absolutely. I'm grateful they're already in jail.
But not if it's your family.
It's not my family.
I mean, somebody hired them, right?
Not necessarily.
Somebody paid them.
I learned something this morning.
Yeah, me too. You didn't want them held accountable if it was your family members. Didn't you tell law enforcement that?
That's not what I told law enforcement.
What did you tell law enforcement?
I told them that the person who did this should be held responsible and that I had nothing to do with it.
Page 122, lines 7 through 12. If somebody tried to kill my ex-husband, they should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. The investigator says regardless of who it is, and your answer is, I mean, it would be different if I thought it were my brother.
But I don't think it was my family, is what I said.
Different now, isn't it?
No, it's not different. That's exactly
different
what I
today,
said
isn't
right
it?
here. No, that's not right.
No further questions.
You are listening to the Roberta Glass True Crime Report, putting the true back in true crime. From New York City, Roberta Glass is now on the record.
All right, let's get into it. So today I thought I would give a little bit more of my argument as to why I believe Wendi Adelson is culpable for murder and conspiracy to murder Dan Markel, why I don't think it's probable that she didn't know beforehand and learned afterwards, or it was done for her as a surprise and she was removed from the plans of this crime. So I'm going to go through my reasons. We're going to look at a little footage together, but mostly it's going to be a little bit different kind of a show where I'm going to do a lot of talking, some clip viewing, and then maybe we can talk about it together. But before I want to get into that, I want to look at some of your comments from last night's episode. Boxer Lover 9483 says, I absolutely love your commentary because it's usually exactly what I am thinking. I also have so much respect that you end these talks with the personal notes about Dan. He made such an impact on this world in his short life, and those that decide to end it are truly evil. Thank you very much, and I'm enjoying reading those victim impact statements. You really do get such a good view of who Dan Markel was. One thing I noticed in the letter you read here, meaning yesterday, was the comment about how she, meaning the letter writer Emily, kicked back one night with Dan and they drank bourbon together. That's not really a typical drink. Usually you kick back with a beer or something lighter, right? And she talks about kicking back with beers too in that same letter. I wonder if bourbon was something that Dan specifically enjoyed. It would make sense then that Wendi would pick that kind of alcohol to buy because it almost has that double meaning and reminds me of the coincidence on the murder day. Exactly, Boxer Lover, exactly what I was thinking too. I had the same thought. Did Wendi pick Bullet Bourbon as a kind of middle finger to Dan? Who knows? I think only Wendi could tell us, and I think the chances of Wendi telling us are 0 to 0. But I had the same thought. Greg Shell 8570 says, I hope Wendi is having trouble sleeping and shaking in her boots, as we say. This did not turn out how they planned. She must be cracking at the seams. The kids must feel the pressure. Interesting comment. I didn't think too much about how it was affecting the kids. I thought about it and how it affected the relationships and the family, having to do with the kids. But I honestly didn't think about how the pressure on Wendi would affect her children. Interesting thought and interesting comment, Greg. Lucy Warner says, in a phone call, Donna says, Dan said we could try to leave but might not make it out, or something along those lines, referring to her and Harvey trying to flee the country. Isn't that an issue now that he's her trial lawyer? Well, I think it could. My understanding, and I'm not a lawyer, is that it could be seen as an issue for the bar should anyone try to report Dan Rashbaum to the bar, and I'm not suggesting you would, but that kind of authority is made up of lawyers, and they rarely get in trouble with something unless it's really, really, really bad, like stealing from clients or something like that. So these kind of smaller, morally vague, I think I heard Carl Steinbeck talking about it, saying, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't advise a client about their possible fleeing. Basically, I wouldn't advise my client that there's a grand jury possibly going to be held here on Wednesday, and if you want to flee, you might not make it out. Basically, avoiding justice. It really is, you really do look morally sus, as the young people would say. So, yeah, it makes you look like a sleazy lawyer who likes to flirt with the wrong side of the law. That's what it makes. I really don't have a lot of respect for Dan Rashbaum. He's embedded himself with these morally vapid ghouls, and I think why he feels so comfortable with them is probably because he's one himself. I don't think you get much worse, in my opinion, than hitching your wagon to someone like Josh Dubin and the movement that he comes from, the whole wrongful conviction movement. As I've said before, I don't think much of it. I think it's the biggest fraud in America that nobody's talking about. So helping guilty people get out so that they can be paid off by these big civil claims. But I'd love to hear it on an opposite side. If you've read some of the transcripts for some of these wrongful conviction cases that I've tried and you disagree with me, I'd love to hear your opinion. So it's always a way to get me talking in the beginning. I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, why Wendi? Why I think Wendi's guilty. Some of the things that I'm going to talk about are really not maybe things that you couldn't bring into court. It's the whole thing. It's as many reasons as I could think of, and how I view Wendi and why I see her as culpable. When we return, you have to look at the totality of what I'm saying. Please do not pick one small point and say you're wrong because that's one small point and an innocent person could do that. Please look at the totality of it. When I return, we'll get into it. Don't go anywhere. If you are enjoying this episode of my True Crime Report, please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share this episode. Get access to exclusive podcasts and other bonus content by becoming a patron today. If you have a question or comment for me, shoot me a super chat and I'll do my best to answer it and read it on air. Thanks so much. Now back to the show. Okay, so while I am talking, thought I'd keep this playing so you it's not so visually boring for you guys to look at. So, first of all, Dan and Wendi were in a contentious divorce. And Dan Markel was asking the courts to censure her law license for hiding assets. And that is no small thing, to lose your law license. Just imagine that you've worked your way through law school, you've finally gotten your law degree, you work teaching students about the law, you've worked with all sorts of different kinds of victims, you've clerked for a judge, and your ex-husband, someone that your whole family hates, is threatening to take that away. That would put the fear of God in you. Anyone, not just Wendi, anyone. Dan Markel was also insisting that Wendi was unfit to teach students at FSU. So he was threatening her career. He was, according to Wendi's podcast, Dan Markel was the only one who knew what a bad person Wendi was. And meaning he saw behind the mask. And for someone like Wendi and her family, that would put, again, the fear of God in you. They're all about image. They're all about getting over on people. And one of the biggest things that Wendi has going for her is her public image of a caring person. She works with victims. She cares about people. She's connected to friends. She's got a lot of friends. She's involved. To be outed as a mentally unwell, morally bankrupt person in a small town like Tallahassee would not have been good for her. Again, would have scared her senseless. The kosher foods is really just the surface. You have to look beyond the surface. So the thing with the kosher foods started early in the marriage. It was started at the wedding, and it was started, meaning the fight over kosher foods was started by the Adelson family. Now they split the cost of the wedding. Danny had his rabbi there. He had friends and family who ate kosher. And they decided not to honor his wishes, meaning the Adelson family decided not to honor his wishes and do what they want. So you have to see that as a challenge, meaning lose your ridiculous kosher lifestyle. If you want in on this marriage, if you want to be a team player with the Adelsons, you're going to have to forget all about that. And it was a real challenge, and really early into the marriage. You don't get much earlier into the marriage than the wedding. And according to Abigail Schreier, you heard that victim impact letter, she said that Wendi had called off the engagement once, broken up. So already it's starting off on a footing where it's like a power struggle. So Dan Markel they're thinking, I would have thought if I were the Adelson family, was, well, we'll make a thing about the kosher food and he'll drop it if he wants to keep Wendi the prize. And you have to remember, they think of themselves as like a royal family. They're the prize. They're the elite. Donna's disparaging Dan to the kids was the Adelson showing showing that their father's opinion should not be considered. So you have to remember that the entire Adelson family, including Wendi, thought that Dan Markel was a religious zealot. And that's really important. I don't think it's talked about. So if you're a religious zealot, you're a dangerous, unreasonable, irrational person, almost like a cult member. You cannot be reasoned with. So not only are you dangerous, but you cannot be reasoned with. So there, for the Adelson family, there was no compromise. There was no tit for tat. They weren't going to negotiate with a religious zealot. Have you ever heard, we don't negotiate with terrorists? I would put religious zealot in the same category as a terrorist. Dangerous to your kids, irrational, don't know what they're going to do next, because they are living by rules totally of this one thing, have total belief, and reality doesn't come into it. So you have to see it a little bit from the Adelson side, so that any kind of compromise with Dan Markel would be giving in. And also they're a family that loves to win. So let's go back to Donna's emails. Donna was pressuring Wendi not to compromise because Dan Markel's horrible nickname had not beaten the Adelson family yet. So there's something in this that wow, this is really bright. I'm just looking at the screen there. To compromise with him is to lose. And you have to think about Wendi's upbringing. She was trained raised to compete. She had always risen to the highest levels, achieved to the highest levels. She wasn't used to losing. And that would have motivated her more to continue on in this battle. And you also have to remember that Wendi stole, according to the legal filings, $600,000 from Dan Markel. Also going into the safety deposit box and taking the Holocaust diamond and other jewelry. So there is a element of greed. So she always denies that she ever got any kind of financial reward from Dan Markel's murder. But she was on the phone finding out how to get a hold of his finances days after the murder. She wasn't grieving. So she could have been outed also for stealing as a thief. These are all things you do not want associated with your name in a relatively small town. You know, I would think the legal community, what I've heard about it in Tallahassee, works very much like a small town. Wendi's version of events is not congruent at all with other witnesses. Even her own brother says that she was not getting along with Dan Markel before the murder. And losing this relocation was a loss, okay? So that she didn't want to go through. Terrible jealousy. Dan Markel was dating Amy Adler, who was Jonathan Adler, the designer's sister, the beloved. She's a beloved professor at NYU. She teaches law, and she's also incredibly good looking and with elite connections that Wendi did not travel in and could not travel in. So it's significant that Wendi blamed Adler's ex-husband and put the spotlight on him in her police interview. So all that I think is significant. Okay, I'm just going to take a drink of water. Hold on one second. So enter Jeffrey Lacasse. Wendi, I think he's the most important witness in this case. He heard the hitman joke, the TV joke. And we know that Charlie is someone that likes to repeat himself, but is Wendi, and likes to tell jokes often, but is Wendi someone who likes to tell jokes or likes to repeat jokes? Why is she repeating that joke on the morning of the murder to the Geek Squad? And why is she repeating it to Craig Isom? I mean, does any of her friends say, oh, that Wendi, she loves to tell and retell jokes? Why is this the only joke that we ever hear in this story, her retelling? I understand that it's a significant joke just because of the timing of it. Donna's text to Wendi telling her that the Geek Squad is on the way is sus as heck. And it's like to fix one of the two TVs in your living room. It's really awkwardly wording, overly written, and odd to my eye. Jeff Lacasse said that the TV was broken purposely and that the kids could not do that kind of damage to the TV. Wendi doesn't know how the TV was broken. She thinks the kids did it. But then there is her brother testifying that the kids threw a remote control at it. Why does Charlie know the way the TV was broken and not Wendi? The day Wendi was weepy and different months before the murder. Jeffrey Lacasse says that that day meant something to him long before he knew what. Wendi is canceling a trip because she has to be back on that day. On that day, it's not the middle of winter in Alaska or Maine or even New York. It's the summer in Florida. And she has a lot of friends who could pick up the kids. Look at how quickly she arranged for her kids to be taken care of at the police station. She's got to be back for the date of the 18th. Why? Wendi's, excuse me, I had a cough. Wendi's 18-minute call with Charlie. Why is it so long? If the TV was really like what Jeffrey Lacasse said, was like a TV that you'd find in a dorm room, why was she getting it repaired? And why was Donna, this doesn't so much go against Wendi, but Wendi's a part of the whole TV narrative, so I included it. Why is Wendi so excited to get her TV, and why did she refuse Jeffrey Lacasse's offer to replace her TV or to, and why did she insist she had to have it fixed? The whole time when she was with Jeffrey Lacasse, when she was treating the kids to a movie night, she insisted that the TV be watched, that this How to Train a Dragon 2 this special movie night for her sons be watched on this broken TV. It sounds like she's trying to make a memorable alibi that this TV is broken for Jeffrey Lacasse and perhaps her children. Her discomfort over being asked about WhatsApp. Why is she so uncomfortable? Why is she so unsure? That goes with the rest of her memory being very bad. And the fact that she was talking on WhatsApp with her friend in England when she, here's the big one for me, drove by the crime scene. I agree with Charlie Adelson that it would be incredibly unusual that she would drive by the crime scene, not get out, not ask about the kids. It's not a shortcut. No one but Wendi. Once again, Wendi's narrative is incongruent with everyone else who lives on planet Earth. No one says it's a shortcut. And her announcing at the police station, it's the shortcut, guys. It's the shortcut. Reeks to me of some kind of brainwashing that she's trying to do, trying to make people feel odd or strange about the fact that they might be suspicious of this shortcut. Everyone knows it's the shortcut. She says it like, everyone knows it's the shortcut, guys. Everyone knows. Her own brother says the chances are 1 in a million that she drove by the scene of her ex-husband's murder by accident. The fact that she says a tree was down despite police cars, a crime scene tape, and a forensic van, things that she would be familiar with as a lawyer and someone who's worked in criminal law and with victims. She did not call daycare about her children. We know that this is abnormal because the real estate agent called her. So why is the real estate agent so much more concerned than Wendi herself? Why is Wendi not alarmed? Why is Wendi so uncurious? Is that even a word? Why is Wendi not curious about the scene? Why does she assume it's a tree when it hadn't been raining? The weather hadn't been particularly stormy the day before. Bullet bourbon is an odd choice. Why was it chosen? And Charlie and her brother Charlie agrees with me and says bullet bourbon is an odd choice. And most people who saw that piece of evidence said, why would she pick that bourbon for the party? Charlie ignores Donna's claim that she was told to buy that specific kind. And hold on, let me just pause this for a second. And let me show you how weird this invite is. So this is the top of it. So this is right here where the bow is. She's being asked to bring bullet bourbon or some other kind of spirits. And I've made this argument before, and here's the bottom of the Stock the Bar party, what's been shown as the Stock the Bar party invite. I don't know if it was made by someone trying to create an alibi for this very weird evidence or created by a fan or someone else trying to get clicks. I don't know. I find it very odd. Because you would think that if you asked bullet bourbon, sure, you could type in individually here, but it doesn't say Wendi, you bring bullet bourbon. I've also heard other people say she had a list of things to choose by. Certainly rumors come and go in this all the time, not to be taken as fact. I just find this very odd here. Another, why did she keep the receipts? Who keeps a receipt for alcohol? It reminds me of the Mitch Hedberg joke about getting a receipt for a donut. We don't need to bring ink and paper into this. You give me the donut, I'll give you the cash, you give me the donut. End of transaction, right? Her behavior at the police station, weeping uncontrollably, then speaking calmly with full voice next minute, looks like she's putting on a show. And one of the first things she says to both Sarah, the victim's advocate, and Craig Isom at the police station is that normally she's much more entertaining, is giving a performance on her mind. That's what I'm have to ask myself when I hear her saying that. And we know Donna's email that you're a good actress when you want to be. Did Donna give her the confidence that she could act her way out of this? Also, her sucking up to the victim's advocate is very strange. 1 minute, she's sending her out not to do busy work, when it looks to my eye like the victim advocate is just starting to get a little curious about her behavior, finding her a little sus. She says, I'm not sending you out to do busy work, or I'm not just sending you out to do busy work, which sounds to my ear like an admission in the negative. So when she starts talking about Charlie and her family doing this, she says, it's almost like she says, I would never do this, and even my mother would never do this, and my brother would never do this. Trust me, I'm a trustworthy person. No one in my family would do this. And it looks like she's getting the confidence that maybe they are believing her and believing she's not the type of person to do this. Remember that Sigfredo Garcia's lawyer said about this family, they're dentists. They're not the Sopranos. This is a very unusual case. We normally don't see an entire family conspiring except for Robert. Of course, when I'm talking about the Adelsons, I'm not talking about Robert, the eldest. And I'll get to him in a little while. So it sounds like, most people wouldn't think that their family did this. Also, Jeffrey Lacasse's car. Let's get into that. And let me show you a quick other video. Hold on. From the Gibbers channel. And the links are always in the description of my episodes. If they're not at the time of my live streams, I'll put them in right after. This is from the Gibbers channel. Hitman knew, how did they know what car to rent? Let's take a look. So Gibbers channel is making the argument that Jeffrey Lacasse's car was matched, that Sigfredo Garcia and Rivera rented a car to match or look like Jeffrey Lacasse's car. So the channel's making the argument that all the cars looked exactly alike. So let's take a look at this. What would the hitman know what kind of car to rent? Katie says she never opened the manila envelope. So on the first trip, it's light blue. They rented, on the second trip, it's maybe a little bit of a darker blue. It's first trip. So it's on the 1st of June. It's a light blue. Still on the first trip on June 3rd. It's a little darker blue until they move to the Prius that they eventually rented. There was never a single car. Wait, hold on. Let me go backwards a little bit. There was never a car dissimilar to Jeff's linked to the murder. Not a single car was a 2-door, a subcompact, an SUV, red, black, Ford, Chevy, all light-colored, 4-door imports that could be mistaken for Jeff's car. Here's what the hitman had to select from. Thank you, Jibbers, for that. It's a really good visual way of showing you what I'm talking about. I mean, there's so many things. I think I'm what am I, halfway, a little bit more than halfway through my argument? I found it very odd the way that Wendi basically raised the idea that Jeff Lacasse should be a suspect when he was Jane's friend and she set them up. The need to announce that she's traumatized, like, hey guys, I'm traumatized, when a really traumatized person does not need to announce that they're traumatized in a police station. It's self-evident. Her work with victims would give her a lot of material to mimic. Her breakup 1 week before the murder is very sus. Has she ever broken up with another boyfriend in that way? I find it very odd. Wendi seems to be someone who, when her mind's made up, it's made up. Look at the way that she left Dan while he was on a trip, Dan Markel, while he was on a trip. She left the divorce papers, took the furniture, left only the boys' clothes that they had outgrown for maximum damage to cost. Katie McBanawas, one of her lawyers, called it dropping the bomb, and I think that's a good description. Her dislike of Lacasse is very sus to me, and it reminds me of her dislike of Dan. Once Lacasse figured out who she was, he even says, once you catch Wendi in a lie, she'll never trust you again, which I find very telling. Donna and Charlie also seem to have picked up this hatred of Lacasse. Why? If he's wrong, if he's so wrong, you just laugh him off. Her testimony under oath, even with immunity, has many provable lies, i.e. kosher style food, anyone? That she didn't drive by the crime scene, or she did drive by the crime scene, that changes. Her demeanor on the stand doesn't change even when she's talking about her ex-husband's murder, the father of her children's murder. It only changes when Georgia Kappelman accuses her. Then the doll-like face is dropped, and we get the kind of intense stare and the really raised voice and what I see as phony indignance. Her lack of memory on the stand. She says, I don't know or I don't recall so many times. Check out the society pages. Fantastic video on that. Her refusal to testify and her lying about her refusal to testify. So she refused to testify. She wanted to take the fifth. And the fact that Donna, Harvey, and Wendi all wanted to take the fifth, I find makes them look guilty. It's not something you could bring into a court of law, but I don't have to be limited by those things. I'm looking at everything. Oh, Donna and Wendi hung up on Detective Isom when they wanted to talk to him. And so they went to Dan's memorial service, and then when Dan Isom called them, Donna had bad reception, and Wendi, Isom said, practically hung up on him. And then they had a lawyer call and say, we're not going to participate with this. Why does Wendi lack curiosity about who killed the father of her boys? All right, I'm going to take a quick break. I just need to rest my voice. This is a lot of talking. When I get back, I'm going to finish it up, hopefully. And then we're going to look at a little footage. When I return, don't go anywhere. See you on the other side of the break, guys. If you are enjoying this episode of my True Crime Report, please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share this episode. Get access to exclusive podcasts and other bonus content by becoming a patron today. If you have a question or comment for me, shoot me a super chat and I'll do my best to answer it and read it on air. Thanks so much. Now back to the show. Okay. So Wendi's celebration dinner, or the family's celebration dinner is a better way to put it, really is of one piece with the rest of what we know about this family. What do you do when you've won something? You celebrate. So they feel that they won the war at that time, that Dan Markel's murder was a victory for this family. She vomited on the table, and no one in the family has been able to answer, except Charlie, what he gave her father for his 70th birthday. I find that very odd. And I find it very odd that Charlie would buy the catering for such a big event. She lies about the hatred of Tallahassee. Why do that if somehow her hatred of Tallahassee is not connected to Dan's murder? She lies even though she has immunity, suggests she's protecting not only her family but herself. So if you have immunity, you're not involved in a conspiracy, then you tell the truth. But if you're involved in a conspiracy that involves other people and other people in your family, then you would expect to lie, because it doesn't just implicate yourself, you're implicating other people in your family. Your testimony does. Does that make sense? I hope so. She lies about her book. She claims she doesn't like to talk about herself, but she gives many speeches. She made a podcast and she wrote a book. She claims she's afraid for her own safety, but she gives lectures in public, including in Tallahassee. She never changes her name. She gets closer to her family. So if this were done without her knowledge and say she figured out after the fact, and she disapproved of it or she was upset about it, she would move further away from her family. But instead, she gets closer to her family, not only physically, but emotionally closer. And it's the exact opposite of what her brother Robert does. So Robert is incredibly curious. And when he finds out his family, or concludes that his family took part in this, he has nothing to do with them, which would be the logical thing. You don't want to be amongst a family of murderers unless you're a murderer yourself. She claims to not know anything about the facts of Charlie Adelson's case. She changes her kid's name, getting rid of the Markel name, once again reinforcing the idea that she really hated Dan Markel and wanted to obliterate his influence off the earth and out of her kid's life. And she changes even the middle name of one. She also bars the Markel family from contact. Same idea. She wants no influence from Dan, even after he's been murdered. Invites and disinvites the Markels to her son's bar mitzvah, but after Charlie's arrest, she disinvites them and she lies about the reason. So this is right before Katie's second trial. So it would have looked good for her to have had contact with the Markels. She could have testified that she made contact with them and that they were right. She never moves out of Florida. If she's so scared. And right now we're watching Wendi isolate herself from the family after Charlie's conviction. And I think the biggest reason, and I've said this before, but I'll say it again, is if this is a gift for Wendi and it's done as a surprise, you have to be prepared for the gift to go wrong. And you would think if it went wrong, she would not have anything to do with them. And that they're willing, Donna, Harvey, and Charlie are all willing to do that, take that risk. Also, who else would know Dan's schedule? That's a big reason for me. Wendi is positive it's not her family, but how does she know? She has no theory and she's not curious. Rivera says that Sigfredo Garcia pointed her out. Wendi claims this can't be true because it wasn't her day, but we know she often picked up her kids early and whenever she felt like it. That was one of the major problems between herself and Dan. And Wendy's sure she will never be charged. Why? If her brother was just wrongfully charged and now wrongfully convicted, wouldn't that be a reasonable fear? So that is what I have. Those are all my arguments. Tell me if I'm terribly wrong or if I'm out of left field. But that is how I see it. And I see Lacasse as the most important witness should Wendi ever be tried. And we can look at her testimony. Look at Jeffrey Lacasse. I just wanted to revisit his police interview. Let's take a look, shall we? So it really gets good about halfway through here. And I skipped one really, I'm sure, one YouTube not friendly part. So excuse me. But so the beginning, he comes in and he says a lot of negative things about Dan Markel. And then he realizes that maybe Wendi even brainwashed him. And this is when he's trying to communicate that how odd the whole series of events are. Let's take a listen.
It was pretty recent. It wasn't that day, but it was last month, last couple of weeks, something like that.
So he goes to a Korean wedding as the only Anglo.
Yeah, exactly.
And some men took offense because he was a date for one of the Korean girls that was at the wedding.
Exactly. And he got my
And he probably opened his mouth or something. So
he says he got some.
his way of getting retribution is the girl that brought him to the wedding.
And she said, I'll miss the kids at that point. I said, okay. A couple of days later, I say, well, she said, but I want to spend that time with you. I was leaving for Tennessee on Friday. She said, I want to spend that Monday through Thursday with you. I said, great. You want to go to St. Augustine? She loves the beach. She hates Tallahassee. This, again, is just very strange and suspicious to me. Wendi Adelson tells me, what I want to do is a staycation. I want to stay home in Tallahassee. I said, you want to stay in Tallahassee the hottest week of the year? He goes, yeah, we'll go to Tom Brown Park. We'll do this. I said, you hate it here. I'm offering to take you away. Why wouldn't you? It's just really strange at the time. I remember saying to my friends, like, Wendi wants, people laugh. I said, Wendi says she wants to stay in Tallahassee. Like, she leaves town. Sure, you know, every chance she gets, she leaves town. Why would she want to stay? I said, I don't know. I have no idea. I finally managed to convince her to do a trip to St. Augustine, but we had to schedule it so that we were back basically by the time of the shooting. So that was just strange. It was peculiar at the time. When we scheduled that trip to St. Augustine, I'm sitting there, she has her calendar open. You have to schedule everything with her. That's just how she was. There was just, at the time, I can remember sitting in her office trying to schedule this, and there's this weirdness about that weekend. We're scheduling other things, no problem. But that weekend, she just was intent on. That day meant something to me before Danny was shot. Like, there's something weird about that week. I don't know what it is, but there's something weird about that week. If we keep going through June, other things I noticed in June that were really crazy.
Let me back up a second so I get this right.
Yeah.
July.
So it's just very odd that she wants to stay in Tallahassee. And why is she saying on the stand that she loved Tallahassee and she enjoyed it and she was looking to make a home there? She didn't think it was that bad. And that Waiahasee Springs or whatever it is in her book was just all fiction and it was based on her friend of hers. When, I mean, the details are down, the Dan Markel character could be called, Stan Sharkel. It's that close. And she's lying about it. I mean, she lies so boldly and so childishly. It's like without sophistication is what I mean. And she's like, oh yeah, I want to stay. I want a staycation. He's like, I'm offering to take you away. Why does she want to be around Tallahassee around this time? It's almost like she's preparing for something.
July 11th through 19th.
And another thing I missed is that she never talked about what she was going to do with the children that night. Did she have babysitters, as you guys have pointed out? Did she hire a babysitter? We've never heard that. In the whole police interview, she never says, I had to hire a babysitter that night.
You're supposed to go to California.
Yeah.
Leave on the 11th, come back on the 19th.
I can look it up for you. It might be 12th to 19th, but it was the week that Danny was shot. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when is she saying, I can't do it? What date? What date are we talking about when she's telling you I can't do it?
Early June. I can pull up the exact
Early
date.
June.
Early June. Yeah.
So you're supposed to go to California with her, just you two.
We have plane tickets purchased. And she sat me down. I think it was June 5th or 7th. I will find out for you if you would like.
Yeah.
And she just said, I can't do that, and it just didn't make sense. It just didn't make any sense.
So she'd already said that date was that window of.
She said, this is the 1 week I have to go see your parents. And I
11th
said,
through the 19th.
but that was in May we booked them. So 3 different times she canceled plans with me in the 2 or 3 day period with Danny.
So what you're leading to is this is highly suspicious that she needs to be here on the 18th of July.
Yeah, just anecdotally, subjectively, whatever it's worth, it was really weird. It was really strange. I know this woman. I know her really well. And there was something at the time, me saying to my friends, what's going on? It's just really, really strange. It's just really.
She'd never done anything like this before?
No, she had canceled and recanceled, and she did that all the time. Completely disorganized person. But it usually made sense. Usually had a reason. And usually the reason was something about court with Danny, or parents wanted to come down to South Florida. Every other time but this, I understood. This time I was completely puzzled. It didn't make sense. And it was very, very strange.
Okay, so she cancels this trip to California. Did you go anywhere? No, of course you didn't. You were okay.
Wish I had.
Yeah. And so what happens to these plane tickets?
Her ticket, I have no idea.
So she bought her own?
Yeah, we bought separate plane tickets. As a matter of fact, I don't know that she did buy a plane ticket.
Oh.
But she told me she did.
Same airline? Same flight?
I can find out, but I can send you my reservation. Because we had a discussion about getting our seats moved together. So I think she probably bought a ticket, actually. But I never saw the ticket.
It wasn't discussed any further?
I don't know. It gives me chills thinking about this police interview. I've never heard it described by anyone else as a drumbeat. And thank you very much, Stephen Cyber, for the super sticker. Appreciate it. I've never heard it described that this date meant something to me, even before I knew what it meant, it was like a drum. He describes it like a drum beat, like we're all marching towards something, to what you don't know. This really could be an opera. I don't know another case like this case. And working on getting some really interesting guests to talk about this case. One coming up. I think it's going to be good. I think you guys are going to be psyched. So lots of cool stuff coming up. Let's get back into Jeffrey Lacasse.
I can't recall.
Okay, so that's the first thing. In early June, she says, Jeff, I got to be back on that Friday the 18th.
Exactly.
To pick up the kids. I guess that's going to be the first of her week with the kids, maybe?
Yeah, she gets the kids back after having, because they went to 7-day schedule in the summer.
Right.
And she's, I miss the kids. I said, we'll be back. If you don't want to go, just tell me I don't want to go. No, I want to go. I just got to be back for the kids. There was a special.
Okay, why not adjust the flight or adjust the.
Well, she had the kids the previous week. This was her one free week. She's also booked all summer. So
the 18th is a Friday.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so, going backwards, the 11th should have been a Thursday, I'm thinking.
I can look it up, but it just wasn't. She was booked week by week throughout the summer.
She doesn't even have any school stuff, right? I mean, I don't know if you're off during that time.
I love Jeffrey Lacasse's nod. He's like, yeah, she doesn't. And it's that same kind of aha, I don't know, I hate to say aha moment, but that same kind of aha as when he's like, wait, you took the shortcut down where? To Wendi, Detective Isom. But you gotta give it. I don't even think I would have picked that out. I mean, I've interviewed police officers, and they make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. They know, or at least my experience with them is they know that the question that's coming before you ask it. They know people so well. Paige McLean, grateful for this channel and the respectful chat. Thank you so much, Paige, for the super chat. It really allows me to do what I do. So thank you so much. Appreciate it. Back to the interrogation or that's not really interrogation, it's a police interview is a better way to put it, of Jeffrey Lacasse.
So I'm completely off. She has a lot of obligations to her parents. Her parents want her down in Miami every chance she gets. All through this county, there's parents.
All right,
So three different occasions. at the time, it's like, oh, what's going on with the 18th of July or the week of the 18th? What is this? I don't understand what this is.
Okay, so the first thing is the California trip, and it's next.
Yeah.
Then you want to take her to St. Augustine,
She
because
says, and she wants to stay, and that's just bizarre.
but did you ever make plans to go to St. Augustine?
Yeah, so a week later, again, we sat in front of the calendar, and it was really strange. There was this hesitancy about that weekend. She says, I'll go to St. Augustine, but we have to be back early on Friday.
Early on Friday.
Early on Friday.
What is early on Friday?
We were going to wake up and come straight back from St. Augustine, so we would have got up at 7, been here by 9 or 10.
Okay.
She had to pick up the kids from school till 4, didn't make sense.
Okay.
So I said fine, and my thing was I was going to drop her off and then drive up to Atlanta. I was going to drop her off and go. So that was just strange. It just stuck in my head. Like, what?
Because your trip to your friend up in Tennessee, what was the date you were supposed to go?
I was supposed to leave at about 10 or 11 a.m. on Friday the 18th.
Okay.
Because I was supposed to the original trip was to go straight to Atlanta, stay the night in Atlanta, then go up to Tennessee the next day. So I was supposed to leave here at 10 or 11 and get there at 4 or 5.
On Friday afternoon.
Friday afternoon. Yeah,
Okay.
that changed, but that was the original.
No, because you left on Thursday.
Yeah, I did.
All right, well, let's jump to that so I can fill in this blank.
Yeah.
Why did you leave on Thursday?
We'd had a huge fight in late June. I discovered some other cheating. I was very upset with her. And she had sent me, had sort of broken up, basically. But she put me on a 7-day hold.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
sure.
I remember that.
Yeah.
She sent you an email or
Yeah,
something?
exactly. So the night before, I was so upset. I was just like, fuck this, I'm going. I said, get out of town. I was upset. But that's something my friends have said to me that I've never said this, but my friends have said, Jeff, sometimes it's hard for me to see this clearly. They can see it more clearly. Jeff, you do realize that if you left Friday at 11 a.m. for Atlanta, what this would have looked like, you would have been in custody. You're really.
Oh.
Now, I'm not saying that, but some of my friends, it was like a clumsy attempt to take attention off her and put it on me. I'm not saying that's true.
And isn't it interesting that all her ideas that aren't her family are either Amy Adler's ex-husband or an ex? So to my mind, that supports the idea that her family and she had worked out Jeffrey Lacasse as the patsy for this crime. Think about it. Also, another thing that makes me think Wendi is culpable in this is that the way she describes her breakup with Jeffrey Lacasse is he thought I was cheating, and her denial of being on these dating apps. So it's a very morally bankrupt, in my opinion, way of living life. So because I did so, it's his calling out my bad behavior that makes him bad. It's a kind of narcissism and that she portrays by that statement on the stand. I can do no wrong, and his accusing of me is wrong, and he's it's his paranoia that made me break up with him. Not that I was outed for cheating on him. She's always perfect and everyone else is terrible. She always plays the victim. She never takes responsibility, and she never betrays any empathy for anyone. Neither in her testimony nor in her police interview. The closest she comes is to her bizarre, almost like a come on. And I've talked about antisocial personalities not really having a sexuality like we think of. Sex is more about power and control for them and how much influence they can have over someone. So when I look at her communication and the way that she deals with Sarah, it looks like a seduction. It looks like they're going to kiss at times. Doesn't our face look alike? I have the same skirt. We could be sisters. I mean, it looks like, it really does look like some scene out of some independent movie from the late 80s, early 90s. Bad film included.
Sounds a little far-flung to me. It sounds a little clumsy to me. But she knew exactly when I was going to leave. I'm a late riser, and she didn't know I changed my plans, obviously. So I'm glad I changed my plans. I wouldn't blame you guys for being a little more suspicious if you didn't. I mean, if I leave at 11, you just see me driving north
Right.
10 minutes after Danny showed up. So that looks suspicious to a lot of people. I know it makes it sound like a criminal mastermind. It may sound crazy to you, but that's what my friends say. So can I go back to the stuff in June?
Absolutely, I'm sorry.
No, any questions you want to ask? I know I talk fast, and
It's just a little faster than I'm usually.
My dad's from Boston, so
Oh,
I'm an adopted Southerner, but I haven't slowed down. So in June, these are just my impressions, but it was 5 or 6 times in June. I'm playing with the kids. We had a good family life, terrible romantic relationship because she was cheating me all the time. But I'm home with the kids with her, nice family life.
You had her house out on
Every time, yeah.
Cameron.
Exactly, off Aqua Ridgewood, yeah, nice house. So 4 or 5 times in late June, I'm playing with the kids, reading them stories. I was very close to Ben in particular, spent a lot of time with those children. And I look out of the corner of my eye, and Wendi would be in the kitchen crying for no reason whatsoever. And at the time, what it looked like to me is she was like taking it all in, and she looked like she was grieving something. And I would say, "What's wrong?" And she'd say, "Nothing's wrong," or make up some bullshit story. She lied so much, it was hard to know. But in retrospect, it makes me worry a lot because it looked like she was wrestling with something. It wasn't suspicious, it was just weird. But in retrospect.
And do I think she was grieving for Dan? No. I think she's grieving for the new life that she's about to embark on. She's grieving for herself and her old life and getting ready to prepare for her new life. Just tell me one time when Wendi showed any empathy for anyone else. Her brother, her mother, her father, anyone. And you have to remember that Wendi was raised to compete and succeed, and that money was the most important thing. And she's lived her life. She will steal. She's shown to steal, kill, rob. I mean, that is someone completely without conscience.
Just like, wow, let's assume she knew something was going to happen. That's how a person might react. She made a choice, but
That's late June.
That's late June. So that happened enough times that I talked to my friends about it. What she was talking about in June, relocation to Miami, how terrible it was to be stuck in Tallahassee, crying like I got stuck here, I didn't choose this, I can't stand it. And she talked about the fact that the only way she could ever relocate is if something happened to Danny.
Now, did she actually say that?
Yeah, she did. Yeah.
This is the first time you've mentioned that.
I don't think so. I think I did mention that to Investigator Hale.
Okay.
I think I did. Well, no, it wasn't. I had 3 interviews with Investigator Hale. And
Okay.
The next 2 was me trying to tell him things like this. I don't think he was hearing me.
Okay.
So, no, she didn't say that.
So you understand why Rob was so hated. This is a family that does not like the truth. They are a cult-like family. They create the truth. Have you listened to those telephone calls? Right? We all look at the trial and we say Dan Rashbaum was terrible. His closing argument was terrible. Charlie Adelson's defense was ridiculous. But if you listen to Charlie and Dell, it was wonderful. It was wonderful. They don't know. They didn't respect you in Tallahassee. They're dumb. And Charlie's calling them inbred. Seriously. So who are the 2 people that could out this family? Dan Markel and Jeffrey Lacasse. Who are the 2 enemies now in this family? Besides Georgia Kappelman, and she's the prosecutor, so she gets a special pass. But actually, you know what? I'll include Georgia in because she's the same thing. She's outing this family for who they really are. She's telling the truth. And they hate Georgia Kappelman and Jeffrey Lacasse the same way they hated Dan Markel. Listen to those jailhouse recordings from Charlie. It goes over and over and over again. Same talk, same insular talk. And when you're in a cult-like family, they can do that forever. They can go round and round and round forever. And Donna's just like the backup singer. Yeah, you're right, Charlie. You're right, Charlie. You're right.
Danny, didn't say that word for word, but it was, because I was saying, hey, we're about to like get serious here. Are you gonna be here? Because she hated it so much. I need to know what's gonna happen. And she's like, well, the only way that, let me give you the context. The only way I could leave is if something happened to Danny. But if that did happen, that would be a tough decision. I would probably need to go back to Miami to be with my parents. So that scenario came from her, but it was a response to a question from me. So, I mean, I guess I need to be fair about that one.
Sure.
But it was, and it's true, right? I mean, it was, I asked if Danny might move with her. She said she would not be willing to do that. But she was talking about that.
She would not be willing to do that?
No, she didn't. Well, Danny had job offers from all over the country constantly, and she didn't want to live in Houston or St. Louis or things like that. I mean, she was miserable here. She was here just because she came with Danny. She didn't like her job. She didn't like the area. She didn't like split custody. I don't know that people knew how upset she was. I mentioned to you before you came into the room when I said this, but this is the time period. I don't know the exact day. I'm so distracted by relationship stuff, I can't quite remember. But she told me that
I'm sorry about that. My internet went out. Are you guys still there? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. All right. Sorry about that. My internet just blew out. Blew out. My apologies. I got to work on this. Yeah. This is happening way too many times for my liking. All right. I'm going to try again. Let me make sure. So, yeah. I think this is a very, very concerning thing that there's all these coincidences. So it's not just Jeffrey Lacasse's word. It is that it coincides with the other evidence. So we don't have to just rely on his word for a lot of this. So it's not like he's saying, well, when I look at the TV and it looks really oddly broken, and Wendi goes, well, I know exactly how that thing was broken. This and this happens. Instead, we get two stories that are inconsistent. Wendi doesn't know how she broke the TV. She thinks the children did it. And Charlie thinks that the children threw a remote control at it. which I don't even know would do that kind of damage. And could they at that age?
Context of your conversation with her where that comes up about Charlie.
Please.
So
She just, she's talking about Danny. She just
where
completely.
are we at?
We're at her house in the living room in late June.
Late June of 2013.
Yeah, 2014. Yeah,
I'm sorry, 2014.
Yeah, late June. And you know what? This might have even been, this is sometime between June 20th and the Monday before Danny was shot.
Okay.
And I want to say it was right before, but I don't trust my memory on that, the date. And she's talking about Danny because it's all she ever talked about. Danny wasn't a human being, he was Satan.
He was what?
He was Satan.
Satan,
Yeah.
okay.
And what was real strange about this was that in January, February, March, they had a lot of court stuff, and I could see why she'd be so pissed off at Danny. Danny had calmed down. He liked his new girlfriend. The judge had read him the riot act in court when they went to court the one time and told the other attorney, you need to calm your client down and stop having your client write his own legal briefs. I'm sick of reading this crap. Danny was going to get his butt handed to him by the court, and Wendi was going to have to concede a couple things, but she was going to win, everybody thought. And he had calmed down. He really had. So I was trying to say, maybe we could talk about Danny a little less. Danny's chill. Danny's happy with Amy. This is good. This is good for us, I was starting to see Danny a little more realistically at that point. So she's in the middle of these conversations. She's just ranting and raving about Danny. Very angry with Danny. She's very sensitive. And the worst thing you could do for Wendi is point out that she's not perfect. And that's what Danny represented to her is, he said, you're a liar.
Right. The worst thing that you can do for Wendi is point out she's not perfect. And look at her testimony. When does she ever concede that she's wrong? And when did she show any empathy for anyone else? I'll give you a little clue. Never. Never. Spoiler alert, never. It happens never. So, yeah. And I think that Jeffrey Lacasse is hearing her side of it, her family saying, oh, you're going to win, you're going to win. But Wendi knew that these threats were true and real. And it's very hard to not have the facts on your side in court. And this is not like criminal court. She doesn't have the OJ dream team behind her or something. I don't know who her lawyer was at that time. But these divorce attorneys can only do so much with the facts. Right? And they're submitting things like she's unfit to teach. She's unfit to be a lawyer. Not good when you don't have the facts going your way.
Things like that. Anyway, she just comes out of the blue and I said, well, I just wish something, I can't remember exactly what I said, but I was like, this isn't going to ever be fixed in the way you want it. You're linked to this man for your life. There's no fix for this, but you have to fix what you think and feel. And she said, well, Charlie did look into having him killed last summer. He said it would cost about $15,000.
$15,000?
That's right. Seems cheap to me, but you would know better than I. And
it's, I want to make sure I understand this completely.
Please.
So June, what was the date?
Between June 20th and March 14th, let's say. I think it's probably I think it's closer to July, between June 20th and July 14th. I think it's closer to July 14th.
Okay. She says, Charlie
did actually look into having him killed last summer. And he was told it would cost $15,000. And one of Charlie's...
This is just paraphrased, but I want to make sure I understand.
Yeah.
Charlie did look into having
Danny killed last summer. It would cost about $15,000. And that's not exactly word for word, but that's pretty close to what she said. Wish to God I had followed up. But how do you respond to that? What do you say?
What did you say?
I changed the subject to us. I was interested in working our relationship out.
She ever bring that up again?
No. Never ever again. But what worries me is that the speech pattern, I'm not trying to play FBI profiler here, but
It's kind of like, I told you half a truth instead of half a lie.
that's how she lies. That's exactly, I'm sure you got that on it anyway. So it doesn't have the impulse control just to say nothing in high stress situations, but gives you this half-assed version. Yeah. So I thought about that a lot.
But you do remember the amount is 15,000?
I do remember that.
No further than that, nothing else?
There's nothing else. I wish I followed up. I would beat myself up about this.
Oh, you didn't.
What am I gonna do? Call you guys? Say my girlfriend said something crazy? I don't know.
No.
The thing that worried me about Charlie is he has a very close friend who goes on these trips with him, who's ex-special forces and he's known for being kind of deranged. And it felt like it was done by somebody who knew what they were doing. So I told you guys that already.
What's his name, though? I never got the name.
I don't know. I assumed you guys investigated it. I don't know. He's a tatted up, known affectionately as a deranged guy. Guy just didn't come back the same like some of these guys do, unfortunately.
But he's a close friend of Charlie's?
It's on his Facebook page. That's what I told investigator Hale.
Okay.
When I heard the crime occurred, about 12 hours, I was shocked. And then as I'm driving up I-75, in my head, I was like, holy shit, Charlie did it. And he got that guy. I can't remember his name.
You're saying this guy is on Charlie's Facebook page, or was?
Was. I don't know if he is.
Okay.
These are really smart people. I wouldn't be Facebook friends with them anymore if any of this is true. Other thing that happened in June, our relationship isn't doing well. All of a sudden, from nowhere, like a 5-year-old kid will try to manipulate you in a very transparent way, and it's like obvious what they're doing. She started doing that kind of stuff. I got the sense we weren't going to make it. It was obvious to me, and I never going to trust her again. All of a sudden, she throws me the world. And I felt at the time, I said to my friends, I've been very careful not to develop like a hindsight bias. I checked back in with my friends. What did I say? They said, you said in June, it felt like Wendi was stringing you along for some reason. And you couldn't.
Right. Why string Jeffrey Lacasse along? This whole story that he paints such a clear picture, at least to my mind. Do you guys see it the same way? When I hear this, and also without Jeffrey Lacasse, put Jeffrey Lacasse aside. You have Tamar Demko. Her police interview is very telling too. And besides these two, just looking at it from above, when does the person who benefits the most is least involved? And why does Rob and Wendi have two different reactions? Wendi is not curious at all, leaves for Miami immediately, on to the life she wanted, strangely. And without any curiosity at all. No curiosity at all. And Robert's intensely interested in who killed Dan Markel. And Wendi knew him the best and benefits the most. It does not make sense. So for all those, it's a nice fairy tale way to say, oh, the other members of the family did it as a gift or did it behind her back or isolated her. It sounds good on the surface until you think about it. It cannot be. Look at her testimony. Because Wendi, if she weren't involved, I think she would be happy to throw her own family under the bus. Look what she's doing now. She's starting to distance herself because Wendi will always do what's best for Wendi. All right, I'm going to take another quick break. When I get back from the break, I'm going to read a victim impact statement. Really interesting one. You're going to want to hear this one. And I think we'll call it a night. Stay tuned. I'll meet you on the other side of the break. If you are enjoying this episode of my True Crime Report, please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share this episode. Get access to exclusive podcasts and other bonus content by becoming a patron today. If you have a question or comment for me, shoot me a super chat and I'll do my best to answer it and read it on air. Thanks so much. Now back to the show. This is a recent one from September 2023 to the Honorable Stephen Everett. I met Danny in 1997 when I arrived in Israel for a year-long fellowship program. Danny was an alumnus of the program and had returned to Israel to visit. He introduced me to his favorite cafe, and he lent me advice about adjusting to living in this new place. Many of Danny's friends talk about how when they first met, he led with a posture of close friends unless given reason otherwise. Danny would ask about your past experiences and your dreams and your wishes for the future. And this is how Danny and I first became friends. Our friendship grew in the ensuing 17 years, despite not living in the same city. When he was living in Washington, D.C. and Florida, he would be in touch when visiting New York or Massachusetts, where I was living. He somehow always managed to fit a visit into his busy travel schedule, and he was always game to join me no matter where I was at or what I was doing. At some point, a number of years elapsed without seeing each other, but Danny picked up as if no time was lost. He was incredibly attuned to when you might need a friend or what an ear, and made himself available irrespective of distance or competing demands. This skill at cultivating friendships across the globe and then connecting his friends to each other is why he's been referred to as the great connector, or the internet before the internet was invented. Danny was a scholar, both professionally and in personal interactions. He was a seeker of truth and justice. He was profoundly insightful and loved a good debate. He was blunt and straightforward about his thoughts, irrespective of whether a topic was controversial, and he didn't shy away from hearing a difficult truth. But as much as he challenged you intellectually, he would equally challenge you to grow emotionally and to be the best person you could be. After admitting that I was distracted from achieving a professional goal, he insisted that I send him a check made out to my least favorite political figure that he would send in if I didn't reach my next goal in time. Danny was equally courageous in expressing his emotions as he was with his ideas. He was the first to say, "I miss you," or to share his pain and to seek comfort. He'd say, "I woke up grumpy and lonely and could use a chat with a friend right now," or to show his unbridled joy, he brimmed with excitement over his boys' achievements, whether learning to sing a song in Yiddish or their dancing antics. At first, I was taken aback, by these shows of emotion from a grown man. But I came to understand that he took emotional risks that most people wouldn't dare. He had the courage to be vulnerable, and I believe that this willingness to be vulnerable is what enabled him to forge connections and to find joy in his friendships. When friends speak of Danny as the great connector, They weren't superficial connections. He almost demanded intimacy. One friend described how Danny would never be content with a quick catch-up on the phone. He wanted to know what was really going on in your life. And right after Danny's passing, a friend described how Danny was just at his home, putting his kids to bed with him, a far more intimate activity than the average get-together between two men. This intimacy led to a deep love. One of Danny's girlfriends once told me that despite her great relationship experience, she never really knew what it felt like to be loved until she met Danny. I wasn't the least bit surprised, and I can't think of a greater gift one person can give to another. During the couple of years before Danny was murdered, Danny and I independently went through life transitions. I was fortunate to have him as a source of support as I walked through uncertain times. They say that tough times show you who your true friends are. Danny was one of the people to whom I grew closer during this time. Just as he was unafraid to share his pain and be vulnerable, he was unafraid of my pain and treated my vulnerability with care. He saw my strengths and valued them and reminded me of them. He saw my struggles and lessened them with his company and friendships. One of my emails to him during this time said, quote, "Hanging out tonight brought me joy, a feeling that has been hard to access lately," unquote. I also had the privilege of being in Danny's life as he confronted his own challenges. As they say, the true test of a person's character is how they respond to difficulty. Danny would share the details of a tough situation with stark honesty, and he wanted to find a fair solution, but then the conversation would often follow with a discussion about how he would respond in the most humane way possible. He said he wanted to choose actions that would make his sons proud. Amidst disappointment, he sought out a path of kindness and peace. He had a great capacity for taking responsibility for his mistakes and for forgiving others' mistakes. He wanted to talk about cultivating a heart of loving kindness, particularly in light of our shared interest in Buddhist teachings. Danny also never lost sight of the gifts in his life. He expressed gratitude for a career that he loved and that allowed him to care for his family, and gratitude for his friends and family and for the communities he was a part of. And perhaps most of all, for his little wonder balls, the word he used to refer to his two sons. Danning's passing has left me bereft. I instinctively turn to my phone to call Danny when there's a piece of news in my life. I miss his famous Bambizzle birthday wishes and his Facebook posts excitingly displaying his boys' art projects and soccer videos. I still feel the desire for him to weigh in with his advice, when facing a decision. I miss his work trips, which enabled our visits. I miss the authenticity he brought to our friendship and the way he encouraged me to grow. I can think of no better way to love someone than to encourage their growth. I tried to honor Danny by remembering what he said at the conclusion of one of his email messages, which now seems prescient. Everything wonderful is also and already fragile. Love mightily while you can. I love and miss Danny. Real friends are a rare gift. With tears flowing from my eyes as I write this, the pain of his loss still cuts deep. A type of pain that does not heal, and I feel profound sadness and anger that this dear friend was senselessly taken from me, from his boys, from his family, from his academic community, and from our shared community of friends. I never stop wishing that my friend were still here. Sincerely, Tamar Mensel. Okay, that's what I have for today. I'll be back Saturday with a new episode at 6 p.m. I live stream every day, but Tuesdays and Fridays at 6 p.m. Eastern. Please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share this episode. Have a great night, everybody.